All right, you already heard by now. The Jets fired Joe Douglas. He's out. Welcome back to the Believe in Jets podcast, New York Jets podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Rami Lavi. And covering the Jets for the New York Daily News, that is Antwan Staley with us today. Antwan, the Jets are on a bye week. We still can't get a break from them as Jets fans.
Man, I was just thinking to myself, like, man, I can't even enjoy the bye week without something going on. Like, seriously.
It's not funny anymore. I'm not laughing. You see one of us laughing. It's just I'm dejected and I'm over it, And the problem is, and you could tell me if you agree, I think they fired a good general manager. Were there some mistakes? Yes, but he built one of the best rosters. And I think a lot of the issues were decisions that were made for him, and he was dejected. And he clearly was done with them. You could see when you guys talked to him last week or whatever it was, he didn't want to talk to you guys. It was just, he was standing there at the pleasure of the owner, as he said. And so the time for him was obviously done here. And so we'll get into the timing of it all. But I think this was a guy who got undercut multiple times by the owner. And ultimately, there was so much other decisions that weren't made by him that he couldn't overcome them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I won't say all the issues were Joe Douglas's fault. He's given 6 years, and basically, the record is what it is. I mean, again, it's not all his fault. I'm not sitting here saying it is. I think it's a multitude of blame you can throw around. Throw it at Robert Saleh. I think you can throw a lot of it at Woody Johnson, to be honest with you. I think a part of the reason the Jets are where they are and where they they'll continue to be is his lays at his feet. This is his fault. But I mean, you're given enough time. I mean, I think you talked about some of the the positives. Drafting Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. That 22 class was really good. But you also look at some of the blunders too. You look at Mekhi Becton. Obviously, that didn't work out. And then back to back, Zach Wilson in 21. Obviously, that didn't work out. Will McDonald seems like he's starting to work out a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. We'll see how Olu Fashanu also develops. I think he's going to be a really good tackle there. It was just, when you mess up on the quarterback position, like, with Zach Wilson, that's going to ultimately do you in. And it's a quarterback league now. So you have to get that right. Ultimately, if you don't, then you're going to be looking for a job. So I think that's what it came down to. And, the Jets still don't have a franchise quarterback moving forward. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers experience has not worked. And now they're going to be, completely starting over in the offseason.
30-64 speaks for itself. That's the record Joe Douglas had. And so unfortunately, you can't overcome that, whether it's his fault or not. And the timing of this actually makes sense because Woody Johnson is on a ticking time clock for him, right? He's leaving, and maybe that's the saving grace. If he's going to hire someone, I don't see anyone wanting to work with him after they just watched what happened over the last few years with the Jets. But if it's, hey, you're hiring me and then leaving for 4 years, maybe I can wrap my mind around that, and I can say, okay, I have 4 years to build this thing without this guy being in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possibly a bright spot in all of this too. I mean, so long as he's not meddling, which I think, you go back to your point about Joe Douglas and while he might have felt like he was done, Woody, interfered in certain, aspects. When you talk about the Devontae Adams trade, I mean, I think the trade would have been made no matter what.
You totally undercut him with Hassan Reddick.
Correct.
You can't do that.
I was going to say that. Adams. Then you talk about Reddick, and then you obviously the Robert Saleh situation, which his opinion was not taken into consideration. Woody did that on his own. So you factor all that in, then yeah, I mean, they could get to a point where the writing was on the wall. I think everybody saw what was happening. The Jets are 3-8 right now, coming off another heartbreaking loss on Sunday, and we knew Joe Douglas was not returning. We know this whole regime is going to get blown up at some point. It's just a matter of what that necessarily looks like from here on out. And you still got 6 games left. So it's still not going to get any easier. And these players are trying to essentially play for a spot next year, whether it be for the Jets or somewhere else.
So the rumors are that the owner is the one who wanted Zach Wilson. The owner is the one who wanted Aaron Rodgers. The owner is the one who then said, but Zach Wilson has to stay on the roster. We can't go get a backup quarterback. How much of that do you actually think is on the owner? How much of that do you think was Joe Douglas? He serves at the pleasure of the owner. It feels like I said, like a guy who was totally neutered by the owner the last couple of years. And his latest press conference kind of proved that.
Yeah, I think I've heard different things about the Zach Wilson drafting. I know, Robert Saleh was not necessarily a fan of that. I do know that for sure. But I definitely think some Woody, some Joe Douglas there too as well. What was the question again? Like I kind of talked myself out talking about something else. What would you
No,
ask
yeah,
me?
I mean, I don't know if it was a specifically pointed question, but the point is the owner's going to keep meddling, and how much
Yeah,
do you think the owner has been meddling? And I think you answered it
a
a
lot.
lot. I think that's
Yeah,
the
a lot.
answer.
I think that's
And
why
so
Joe Douglas was just done. I mean, at some point, like people got to allow you to do your job. If they're not going to allow you to do your job. Then what's the point of you being there? So I think, especially in the last few months of his contract, we knew he wasn't going to get re-signed. So at this point, like he's miserable. The owner's probably miserable. They're 3-8. They're underachieving there. He said it was the best roster he ever seen in his 25 years. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's what Woody Johnson said. So of course, it was going to get to this point at some point.
it is kind of funny who built the roster that you claim is the best in 25 years, the guy you just fired. But if I was Joe Douglas, I wouldn't have wanted to come back. I bet Joe Douglas probably said, "Hey, I'm not coming back at the end of this contract anyway after working for you." So Woody probably was like, "All right, so let's get a head start on this anyway. We might as well just let you go now."
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you might as well. I mean, the holidays are coming up there. I know Joe Douglas has a daughter in college, so yeah,
I
I mean,
bet
I think
Joe
it's
and Rob are
better.
going to be on vacation somewhere, spending the holidays together, just laughing maniacally at what just went down because their reputations have not been ruined. I just saw Todd McShay say Joe's going to be fine. Woody and the Jets will not be.
Yeah, I mean, he'll find another job. It might not be a general manager job, but
He'll
it'll
get
be
back
some
soon
job in
enough.
some organization. Yeah, it'll be some job in some organization as a scout or head scout or something like that. He'll be fine. I know he has ties with the Eagles and Ravens, so those are
Mm-hmm.
both possible options too as well.
Yeah, you're going to a couple of great organizations that you can go to. Mike Elias, or sorry, is that's the Orioles, but I forget the name of the guy down in Baltimore with the Ravens. But you have two great organizations with Baltimore
Yeah,
and
the Eagles.
obviously the Eagles as well, right? So
Yeah.
if he lands in either one of those spots, good for him. As far as the Jets, though, who wants to come work here? Anyone in the league who's watched this, why would you want to come work for Woody Johnson and the Jets? I know there's only 32 of these jobs. I get that that's part of it. But if you have other options and you look around the league and maybe it's the Bengals, maybe there's a change there. Maybe it's another team that could possibly be seeing change. The Bears, any other franchise, you almost look at it and say, I'd rather be there than be working for Woody Johnson and the New York Jets.
Yeah, I think that's if you have a lot of options, then you probably would consider those other options just based
But
on
that's my
ownership.
point. Anyone who has an option is not
Right.
going to work for the Jets. So you're not getting the
Well, it
top
depends
choice.
on. Well, I'm going to say it. Well, yeah, you're probably 100% correct about that, but it depends on what options that you have. If you're a veteran, if you're a guy like maybe like a Ray Agnew, who I've recommended the Jets go after. He's the assistant general manager of the Lions. I think that'd be a great tie to either Ben Johnson or also Aaron Glenn, who also played for the Jets. Back in the '90s and in the 2000s too, before he ended up going to Houston. So I think that would be a great hire for them as far as general manager. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, you're going to live at the pool, especially considering what you may or may not do with Aaron Rodgers. Although I think, at this point, I think he's going to move on too, just simply because he doesn't want to be in this rebuilding situation. And I think the Jets, obviously, this isn't working. So, I think both sides, at a certain point, you're going to come to an agreement that, you're just going to move on. It's just a matter of what that exactly looks like there. But in terms of candidates, I mean, you're probably going to have to go think outside the box a little bit there. You again, like you said, you're probably not going to get the top candidates because there's going to be other jobs that I think are more attractive. But it's still some appeal a little bit with the job too. I mean, you still have a little bit of foundational pieces with Garrett and Sauce, depending on whether you keep them around past their first contract or not. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough slate, especially considering the ownership situation where you got a guy that injects himself in certain situations that he probably shouldn't be, and then it creates some drama and chaos in regards to that too as well.
When he first injected himself this year, I guess it was firing Robert Saleh. At the time, the Jets were coming into the season the favorites to win the division.
And they
And
were, oh no, but to interrupt you, like when they fired Salah, they're only a game out of first place,
only a game out of
and
first
look where they
place.
are now.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, they were the favorites to win the division on BetOnline. So you could go to betonline.com, find all those odds and spreads. And if you want to have fun betting on football the rest of the season, I continue to bet against the Jets. I bet against them on Sunday. I made some money. Can you admit I was right, Antwan? We talked about it last week.
Hopefully you had money on Anthony Richardson because he looked like a Pro Bowler out there.
Richardson 40+ rushing yards. I had money on Anthony Richardson anytime touchdown. Should have taken 2. I had money on Anthony Richardson, and I had money on the Colts money line. So I was good, and I got all those lines from BetOnline. BetOnline, the number one spot to get all your sports gambling needs. And by the way, when the game's over, you can head to BetOnline to their online casino. They have some great stuff there. So BetOnline, the game starts here. So when they fired Saleh, like we mentioned, it felt like, okay, this is a relief. Like he wasn't the right coach, and let's see. It was a move to save the season. This move today is the move that signifies the end of the season, and I think that's the biggest difference. And it's just so fans, when they fired Saleh, I think they were upset in a way because you knew that. You thought at one point that was going to be the coach that works, but I think everyone knew, okay, this is not going to work with this guy. Today, I think no one's happy. None of the fans are happy they fired Joe Douglas. Everyone just knows this is officially the end, and we're upset because now it's the same cycle over again, only we don't trust anyone to get this right, anyone from this ownership group.
I seen it split. Like I seen some people are happy about it too. I think some people wanted Joe Douglas gone just because of the record, and we got criticized with Zach, and we talked about Makai and some other decisions that were made, free agency, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think the fact of the matter is this: you don't fire coaches mid-season, and we talked about this last week too. I felt like once they made that move, that pretty much for me. That was the end because although they had an opportunity there, I think you created another issue when you fired Saleh because now you're lacking leadership. Clearly, if you watch the game on Sunday, that's all you really need. Like you see what it is. Like it's not. Jeff, like I say, Albrecht's a really nice guy. I think great defensive mind, played in the league there. Not to take anything away from him, but there's a lot on his plate right now. And then you're asking this man to do 2 different jobs at once. And he was asked on Monday would he consider giving up defensive play calls. He still says no at this point. So he's going to go down swinging his way. It just now you're just creating another issue. And it feels like a lack of a leadership issue there with the Jets right now. It's still like the same issues going around. No, lack of energy, lack of just enthusiasm like on the sideline. If you look at the Colts sideline, I just look at the sideline during the games, and I have my binoculars like in the press box. You can see the Jets, even if the Jets go out like 3-and-out, and they went 3-and-out 5 consecutive drives on Sunday. And it's just no energy. There's no sense of urgency. It's like, okay, let's try to get this going, like how we can do this. The only person I saw really was doing anything was Morgan Moses. Yeah. Who I think they definitely need to bring him back. Bring him back. Also try to find his replacement too, because he's getting older. But you got to bring him back because I feel like he's a big-time leader in that locker room. But outside of that, I didn't feel like there was a lot of sense of urgency on that sideline. And I think you're showing that throughout the course of the season. And you still got 6 games left. So you got to find something in you to want to play. Otherwise, like this thing is going to continue to unravel. And I think we're already seeing that too.
It's fully unraveled. And Morgan Moses, I don't know why he'd want to come back. He probably wants to go somewhere and win because he's a winning player.
He loves the Jets organization. That's the people you need in the building. He loves the organization.
Look, I would bring Morgan Moses back. I would bring the Williams brothers back. Beyond that, I don't even know where you go. I think you have to blow everything up to the studs.
I think, you have some decisions to make with 5th-year options. Garrett Sauce, despite this year Sauce is having, and I know a lot of people, he's been very critical. You're not giving him a time extension, but you are at his first 2 years, you got to give him his 5th-year extension. Just give him that. Jermaine is going to be interesting because he's had one really good year. He got hurt this year, and then his rookie year was kind of a bit of a wash. So the Jets are going to have to figure out what to do with that. And you got Breece Hall, who doesn't have that 5th-year option. So you're going to have to decide what you want to do with that too. So they got a lot of major decisions. And if you cut Aaron, that's a $49 million cap hit. So are you taking that full on? Because if you are, then you're not competing at all in 25. It's a wash.
I think that's the best case scenario, though, for the Jets.
I agree with you.
Don't try to compete in 25. Enough, okay? Tyrod signed. You could use him as the quarterback. If you want, you can even have Jordan Travis as the backup, right? And see
Or
maybe you
inside
have
somebody else too. Sign somebody, let them compete, and then
yeah,
see
see
who the
what you
best
have
men
in
are.
them. That's fine, and then figure it out from there and try and
Correct.
be as bad as possible. Arch Manning's the top of the next draft. That's what I would do, and that's what you should be
Correct.
selling the. That's what you should be selling the next GM on. Hey, we have some foundational pieces. You'll have a bunch of draft picks. You'll be terrible year one, and then you get to draft your quarterback in year two with a team that
Correct.
should be ready for him to come in and win. Think about it. If you have AVT and Olu on the line and he's coming into that, and you have, there would be some pieces there, even if Morgan Moses is already a little bit older. Maybe he's still there. Joe Tippmann's a solid center. All of a sudden, you're looking at a bunch of pieces for a rookie quarterback to come into, but they should try and suck next year. And if this year wasn't proof enough of, it's pretty easy to suck, you know what I mean, with this roster.
Is that, and the thing about just taking the hit on, like you're just dealing with it next year. You're not spreading it out over time. Like if you spread it, because what got that's also a criticism I have of Joe Douglas. A lot of the void contracts, because a lot of that they kick money down the road, and now you're going to be in this bad cap situation next year.
Well, they
which
kicked
you
money
need to
down the
get
road
completely
because
out of it.
yeah, they kicked money down the road because now it's all in. So we were trying to get as many contracts in as possible. I don't, again, I don't even blame him for so much of this stuff. And when you look at like finding DJ Reed and that contract, Quincy Williams and him, Michael Carter, Tony Adams, even finding Mike White, you know what I mean? Like there were so many things that I think that he did that he doesn't get enough credit for. Thomas Morstead, and I know Greg was good last year, terrible this year, but there were so many guys that Douglas made the right moves on. I think it's easy to look at the top. Okay, it's easy to draft Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. Those were, home run picks in the top couple rounds of the draft. You're supposed to hit on those. But the other stuff that he did, which was finding players around the edges, even a guy like Carter Warren, who last year played really well at the end of the year as a backup offensive lineman that he found. Like, I think Douglas did overall, from what he was allowed to do, he did a decent job. Again, it was the right decision. You had to make it because the record speaks for itself, and the timing actually makes sense because you have to get a head start on whoever bringing in, and they said in the statement, they're going to be looking to bring in the next general manager immediately. But I'm so dejected from overall everything. I knew this was coming, and this just signifies the end of it. And Aaron's going to be gone. I know Connor Hughes was talking about that as well, right? Talking about how he doesn't want to stick around for a rebuild. If he was staying here, it would be for, Joe and Salah, I guess. But it's just, I don't trust that they'll get it right. I don't trust that it's going to get better no matter who they bring in. Who do you think are some realistic options who even want to come here?
In terms of general manager, or you mean coach, or both? I think the Kevin Stefanski. We'll talk about the coach first because I think that's easier. The Kevin Stefanski thing is a little bit interesting because the Browns reported today. Some of the Browns reported that he's not feeling like he's on the hot seat. So if they potentially fire him, then that's somebody I would want to interview.
Oh, whether for sure, he'd be great. But why do they fire him? I mean, they made a terrible decision to go get Deshaun Watson.
Correct, but I don't know the answer to that necessarily. Obviously, I don't cover the Browns, but I think he'll get hired in like 5 minutes if he becomes available. Yeah, easily. So that's exactly what I said on Twitter. I was like, he gets fired, like somebody's giving him a job, whether it be the Jets, Raiders, Jaguars. I think he might be work better in Jacksonville, to be honest with you, with Trevor Lawrence. But I think he will be somebody to look at. A lot of people talked about Ben Johnson. I don't know if he's going to want to come to the Jets, considering the chaos and this organization that it is. But exactly, and you're gonna have to pay him a lot of money, obviously, to come here. I mentioned Aaron Glenn. I think you want somebody that embodies what the Jets are, and I think he has a familiarity. Although it's been a while,
human garbage.
He understands what it is to be a Jet. It's been a while since he's been with the organization, but he still has some familiarity with it. So I definitely think that would be a name to watch out for too. And then you got the Houston Texans coordinator Bobby Slovan. I think he would work pretty well too as well. It just depends on what direction you want to go in. I know a lot of people have mentioned they want an offensive mind, which I understand, especially if you're going to eventually get that quarterback. But I don't think you should limit yourself to defensive guys. I think you could interview a guy like Brian Flores, although I'll be curious to know who his offensive coordinator would be before I would even hire him. Because if you remember the Dolphins situation, that got kind of a little sticky too. But those are kind of the names as far as coaches I would definitely look at.
I would definitely look at Brian Flores as the kind of guy who's a hard ass, doesn't take any crap from anyone. And then obviously you saw what he's done with the defense in Minnesota this year.
Yeah.
He's changed that unit around. And even the stuff with Tua, where Tua was like, oh, he was hard on me. So like you said, you have to get a good OC in there.
And he's from New York too. He's a New Yorker, so he's from Brownsville.
He thought he was getting the Giants job. I mean, that's what the lawsuit's about. So I don't blame him for that. Two names for you who are kind of like out there, but I actually wouldn't mind them. They're older, maybe moving backwards. But do you see any shot of a reunion with Rex or John Gruden?
Well, as far as Rex, Woody's unpredictable, so anything's possible. Although I don't think that's the right move at all.
I don't think so either, but I could see it.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I said, like, with Woody, anything's possible. So I'm not necessarily ruling it out, but it would be a bad move on so many different levels, especially with a guy that's not coached in the league in almost 10 years. So, like, you keep that in mind. John Gruden, I don't know if that's necessarily a good hire either, although it is an offensive mind. He has coached a little bit more recently, but it's a lot, it's going to come with that too, a lot of red tape and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's necessarily the right move either. I think, having a guy there if you can get a guy has experience as a coach in the league, I think that would be good. Yes, I think Mike Vrabel would be really good. I think that would work too.
It's so long funny.
As you can pair him up with a good general manager.
Yeah, for sure. Right. He can't be in charge of player personnel. We saw that in Tennessee, that didn't work out. It rarely ever does work out that the guy who's in charge of player personnel and the head coach works out for him. And I talked to a guy who's I'm good friends with a guy who's a big Titans fan. He's like, oh no, trust me. But I think like when you're so entrenched in the team, you see maybe too much, because I think the consensus is that he's a great coach, right?
I think he has some success. He has success at Tennessee. Yeah. I mean, they end up getting Ryan Tannehill. They end up going to the AFC Championship, ended up making the playoffs a few times there. I mean, if you're the Jets, you're like, man, that's what we need. Like, we just want to we just want to have opportunity to get to the playoffs. Like, we're not even thinking about trying to win a championship anymore. It's just trying to get in the tournament and then see what happens and to continue to build your team. And I think somebody like Mike Vrabel will be good for that organization. And you mentioned it, like somebody that's a hard ass, somebody that can, get up under, somebody, make sure they hold people accountable. And that's what you need.
Yep. Well, it's not Black Monday yet, but it's another dark day in Jets land for the New York Jets, as always. It never ends with this franchise. And we'll be here to talk about it. I don't know what's left to talk about the rest of the season. Playing out a string in the NFL for 6 games. That's crazy. That doesn't happen. Like, this is not, September baseball for the Baltimore Orioles in 2008. You know what I mean? This is 6 games with veteran players, with a future Hall of Famer at quarterback. Like, what do you think happens the rest of the way here?
I think they could beat Jacksonville, but outside of that, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to win many more games. Like, just look at it.
Like, how bad does it get, though? Does it get to the point where we see guys yelling at each other on the sideline, where we see Rodgers just quit, where we see them have to start Tyrod Taylor? Like, what levels can this get to the rest of the way?
I mean, if Rodgers has been dealing with injuries all year. So, I mean, is it possible he could sit down? I actually wrote about this yesterday. Yeah, it's possible. I don't think it's likely, because I don't think he would want to go out that way. I think he would want to at least continue to play as long, because he may not.
Do you think he's going to play another year for someone else?
I doubt. I don't know who would take him at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially considering he's about to be 41 years old in 2 weeks.
December,
and then you're seeing decline, like, just steady, like it just continues. It just happening throughout.
It's rapid
the course of the season.
Now. Like, I just went and watched back. Somebody posted the highlights from Week 3 against the Patriots, and I was just like, that's a different player.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't the same then either, but now you're starting to really see it. Like, not only can he not move, and then somebody said this to me too, and I was like, I thought about it. I was like, that's a good point. It seems like he doesn't want to get hit now. It's like, remember Tom Brady his last year?
He's just trying to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible. It's awful. He looks.
It reminds me a lot like Tom Brady his final year there. So Brady was obviously better, but it seems like he just tried not to get hit. Yeah, he just tried not to get hit at this point. And you're not taking those shots because I don't think he wants to get interceptions.
Exactly. Why ruin the career ledger of the second to least interception or second to lowest interception rate in NFL history? So why ruin that if you're Aaron Rodgers? Just keep with the check downs, and maybe Brees Hall will break one and run into a touchdown for you. So, all right. I don't know how to end this. Just the same old Jets. That's it. That's all I got for you, Antwan. I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you doing this as always. I guess we'll keep talking the rest of the season. We'll talk about your Jordan kick game. We'll talk about your sneakers, some stuff you got going on. I don't know. Maybe I'll learn more about you, of your interest beyond Jets football. This is going to be great. This is going to be a great opportunity for us.
Maybe that's better. That'd be more entertaining than us just talking about Jets losses. Like
I've had enough.
Because I don't know how many more times they're going to win this year, to be honest with you. I really thought they were going to beat the Colts, and they probably should have.
Tell me one time real quick. Tell me I was right about Sunday.
You were definitely right about that.
I know.
Like they gave it away, which I knew they would when Albert did not go for it on fourth down.
Yep.
He should have went for it on fourth down.
And how great was it? How great was it that literally, I don't know if you were watching because you have post-game duties and stuff like that, but literally the next game is the big Chiefs and Bills game.
Yes.
And they have the same exact situation, same exact clock, up to 2-minute warning, or up to coming down, same area of the field, 4th and 2, and they go for it with Josh Allen. And he runs to pick it up. That's the best part of it. He has to play with the legs. And so that's an indictment on Ulbrich. It's an indictment on Rodgers. It's an indictment on everyone.
Correct.
It's just this organization continues to fail.
He said he trusts the defense. He said he wanted to trust the defense, but at that point, we know the defense has been lackluster compared to what it has been the last couple years.
The defense stinks.
Yeah, since they've taken over, like they're giving up an average of 26 points.
You know what, though? I talked about this on the podcast last year. I always talked about how they were never facing anything. Like, teams' whole game plan was don't turn the ball over and don't try to do too much because Zach Wilson will beat himself. Tim Boyle will beat himself. Trevor Siemian will beat himself. So I feel like this is the first time this defense has actually been challenged, and late in games, they prove they're not clutch. And as a Jets fan, you can go all the way back to the Rex Ryan defenses and some of the greatest defenses in Jets history. They always gave up when they needed to stop. They never got it. Think about the AFC Championship game against Pittsburgh. When they really needed to be clutch, the Jets defense has never been clutch. So that's something that's never changed. And only now it's on just a colossal scale with this team.
And they don't get turnovers. That's the thing. Like, they got a turnover on Sunday, but
by the way,
outside of
they
that,
had one Sunday, they would have been 4-1 in games that they forced turnovers. The only game that they lost would have been the Minnesota game, which you could argue if they have a kicker, they win, right? But instead, they lose. They find a way to lose this game. So they're still 3-2 in games in which they force turnovers, which means they've only forced turnovers 5 times in 5 games this year. And in those games, they still have a winning record. For a team that's 3-8, they have a winning record in games that they force turnovers.
Football, I mean, a lot of people make football to be complicated at times. I don't think it is. Like,
it's
you force turnovers,
it's
you stop
funny
people,
because that's not winning the turnover battle. They didn't have to win the turnover battle. Just force one. And if you force one, they have a winning record, which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bottom line. This team is just not forcing enough turnover. That's why I was like, this is not an elite defense. This is not a good defense now at all because you're missing tackles there. You're letting up big yardage, explosive plays there, and it continues to be the same thing each week. And it's, this team coming off a bye week. Now you're playing Seattle on this long rest. Like you won't be playing like for 2 weeks, and then you got Geno Smith coming to town. So. Yeah, it's definitely not going to get any easier. 2
messages to Jet fans before we go. One's to Jets fans, one's to Woody Johnson. Jets fans, please don't buy season tickets. Please don't renew. I know I've talked to a bunch of friends of mine already who have told me they're not renewing their season tickets for next year. It's the only way they'll ever be changed because if they keep raising the prices, the 3rd consecutive year they raise the season ticket prices, they keep raising prices and there's 0 consequences for how bad it's gotten, then they're going to keep raising prices and there's no reason for them to change course. And Woody Johnson, do us all a favor. Just sell the team, please. I'm begging you as a Jet fan. Like, this is not, sports media person. I talked about it. I hosted a show on WFAN on Sunday morning. I didn't want to go that far because I was representing New York as New York sports. And I was the host on WFAN. As a Jet fan, though, I can say this. Just please sell the team. Do us all a favor and get away. Well, he won't. And so the best we can ask for is they wipe the page clean, which again they're doing, and they start over. New GM, new general manager, new head coach. Maybe hire president of football ops. I don't know, but we're back to square one again with this organization, which has been a cycle every 3 to 5 years of going back to square one. And it's frustrating.
Yeah, it has to be frustrating for fans. I mean, it's the same thing all over again. It's like, time is basically standing still and you're going through the same. It's like Groundhog Day.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Groundhog Day. That's basically what it is.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. We'll talk to you down the line. All right.
All right. Sounds good.
See ya. All right. That's Antwan Staley. I don't have much to say. That's it. The Jets, the loss on Sunday, I told you that was going to happen. It did. It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it any easier. It's frustrating, but it's a new low. Every day is a new low with this organization. And so I'm not sure what we'll talk about the rest of the season. We'll try and have some of Bilal's former teammates on. We'll have some guests. We'll have some fun. We'll try and do something different because, I mean, it's over again. Another season that's just dead, and not just a season, but an era, a general manager, a head coach that are just done. So that'll do it for me. This is Believe in Jets. Like, subscribe, share the podcast. I appreciate everyone for listening. Until next time, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Rami Lavi. See ya.